Inclusion and accommodation are essential to what we do at FARE. Our mission is life, health, and hope. And we need to make sure that young people have the ability to live their lives on recreational activities simply because of their allergy. Their quality of life suffers. And when public institutions remarkably are unwilling to take even modest steps to ensure that young people with food allergies have access to life-saving medications and other issues, that failure to accommodate is a barrier to the life and health of these folks. Today we hear from 3 advocates who took a stand for reasonable support of their food allergy. Mason Wicks-Lim and his family sought a simple accommodation that staff at an event would be trained to use an EpiPen autoinjector so that he could participate in a community theater program. Instead, Mason, who is just 10 years old, was advised not to enroll in the program, and in fact, the program was threatened to be shut down. Mason's friend, 12-year-old Sam Picone-Luro, stood up for him and was barred from the program as well. We also welcome civil rights attorney Mary Vargas, who represented them, arguing in court to protect their rights. Mason and Sam faced discrimination and retaliation, remarkably, something no child or adult with food allergies should ever have to endure. I am so impressed by their response, advancing the cause of all individuals with food allergy, and we are so proud to have them with us today. Please join me in welcoming Mason, Sam, and Mary.
Hi, I'm Mason. I'm 11 years old, and I'm allergic to peanuts and tree nuts. I've had allergies since I was 2, and I could tell you all about what's involved with having allergies. But most of you have allergies, so you probably know. Sometimes I wish I didn't have food allergies, because it would be easier not to have to worry about everything I ate. It's also hard to It's also hard to ask for help sometimes, and food allergies sometimes mean being left out. But I do think they made me more responsible and empathetic. I think they made me more responsible because for people without food allergies, food is more of a likes and dislikes situation as opposed to a life and death situation for people with food allergies. I think I'm more empathetic because I have a disability and I can understand the way others feel when they have a disability. I think of it like this. I think of it as if all people were carrots. Some carrots can grow straight down in easy soil, and some have rocky soil. But the ones that grow in rocky soil are more interesting and flexible. Or if people were trees, then some trees have to grow around boulders. But when trees grow around boulders, they're stronger in the end. We in this room are the unique carrots and the stronger trees. I, like you, have to ask for accommodations pretty often. Sometimes it's hard to ask, and usually I don't want to do it. But it's important because of my safety. I always thought of my allergies as something all about safety, but recently I learned they were also about inclusion. Last year I tried to join a theater program. The director did not want to accommodate my allergies. First she said I just couldn't join. When she learned that she couldn't do that, she threatened to shut down the whole program if I tried to join. And finally, she said if she didn't shut down the program, she would not have an adult present who would be willing to administer my discrimination. Basically, the director made it impossible for me to join. When my mom told me the news that I couldn't join, I felt three things. I felt sadness, disappointment, and anger. I felt sadness because lots of my friends were participating, and it doesn't feel good to be the only one who's not allowed to. I felt disappointment because I feel like it would have been pretty easy for the director, Suzanne, to accommodate me. And I felt angry because the only people who could make this whole situation better were the adults, and most of them were doing the wrong thing. What happened was not okay with me, and it wasn't okay with my mom either. So we called the ADA helpline, the Americans with Disabilities Act helpline. We learned that this was discrimination. Then we called FARE and got connected with attorney Mary Vargas. Attorney Vargas helped us file a complaint with the DOJ. The DOJ found in my favor and wrote a letter of finding. It shows that programs have to accommodate people like you and me. It also shows that if someone stands up for you, like my friend Sam, they cannot be retaliated against. That's really important because allies make a big difference in situations of injustice. It feels good to know that if someone else experiences discrimination and they have a food allergy in a similar case like this, they can use my case to defend their rights. Filing a case with the DOJ is not easy. Sometimes you have to go to interviews, and telling your story isn't always easy, but easy and important are not the same thing.
Yeah.
The hardest part for me has been that lots of my friends stayed in the program even after I was discriminated against. They wouldn't see the truth because they didn't want to believe that someone they liked discriminated. Basically, they didn't want to give up something that they liked. That hurt and put distance in those relationships. A few friends supported me. One of them is Sam. Sam is a great friend, and I hope I'm a friend like that too. You'll hear more about Sam later. This case taught me that it's not enough just to be safe. People like us deserve to be part of things we care about and participate with our friends. I'm proud of the work I've done to prove that. The most important thing I've learned is that it's important to stand up for yourself and for others who need your voice. Now I want to thank my lawyer, attorney Mary Vargas, for finding in my favor. My attorney Mary Vargas for taking my case. The DOJ for finding in my favor, and my mom for supporting me and helping me all the way through. Now I'd like to introduce someone who I really admire because she uses her voice to stand up for so many people. Attorney Mary Vargas. Thank you.
So over the past 19 years, I've had some pretty extraordinary and brave clients. And even among that special group, I think you can see why Mason and Sam stand out. They have stunned me with their capacity for empathy, with their ability to find humor even when things are tough, even when they're about to face a room of 300 people or when they're about to be interviewed by the U.S. attorney. Their sense of justice and their willingness to stand up and risk what's important to them for others that they have never even met. So I am very, very proud to represent Mason and Sam, and I consider us as a community to be so very lucky that they're on our team and that they're willing to stand up and use their voices for all of us. Before we talk more about Mason and Sam's story, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I've been an attorney for almost 20 years. I started as a disability rights attorney at the National Association of the Deaf Law Center, where I represented people who were deaf and hard of hearing who experienced discrimination. And we did what's called impact litigation. That's where you figure out the cases that if you win, can change the landscape, can establish important rights for people with disabilities. And then in 2009, I started a law firm called Stein & Vargas with Michael Stein, who is just a brilliant lawyer, and I'll tell you more about him later. And Stein & Vargas is a nationwide civil rights firm. We represent people with disabilities in cases all throughout the United States, and we hope to make the world more inclusive and more accessible for people with disabilities. So I was a disability rights lawyer long before I was a food allergy parent. And then 6 years ago, my youngest child, I have 3 boys, and my youngest, Perry, had his first anaphylactic reaction. So he's allergic to peanuts and tree nuts and shellfish. And when he was 4, he really wanted to go to the same nature camp that his 2 older brothers went to. And he was turned away because of his food allergy and because of his need for access to epinephrine. And my worlds kind of collided, because here I was, a disability rights attorney, in this uniquely familiar position of advocating for inclusion. Except this time I was advocating for my own child, and that is so much harder. And I thought, my gosh, if a disability rights lawyer can have their son turned away or be told that they need to wait in the parking lot for 5 or 7 days of camp, what's happening to everybody else? And it seems like maybe there's a lot of work we need to do here. And that's how we got into doing food allergy law. And at Stein & Vargas, we've made it a particular focus to try and identify cases that will advance the rights of people with food allergy and will make life easier and more inclusive. And it's something that we are very deeply passionate about. I'm also one of 3 allergy moms, lawyers, who started the Allergy Law Project, which is an online free resource that provides information about the intersection of food allergy and the law. So there's information about your rights in daycare or your rights in restaurants, all kinds of information there. And we also put out news blasts when there's an important case that impacts all of the issues that we're interested in. So before we can talk about the intersection of food allergy and disability rights, we need to talk about what does it mean to be a person with a disability. Can you turn the slide? So what is a disability? I mentioned a few minutes ago Michael Stein, my law partner. He is the smartest person I know. He graduated from Princeton undergrad, and he went to Harvard Law School. After graduation, he won a prestigious Skadden Fellowship to do disability rights work. He started a nonprofit in Chile to establish national laws to protect the rights of people with disabilities, and he travels all over the world lecturing on disability rights. He's also deaf. He's a person with a disability. The young woman who's typing back and forth with President Obama in the picture on the left, her name is Haben Girma, and she is a graduate of Harvard Law School. She runs marathons. She is an extraordinary leader in the disability rights movement. She was the one who introduced President Obama at the anniversary of the ADA in July. She also is deafblind. She's extraordinary. She's a person with a disability. The young man who's got the mask on the far right, his name is Zach Featherstone. Zach is a real adventurer. He is a backcountry guide, a river rafter. He does extreme skiing. He's one of those people who goes out of helicopters on mountains in the West and go down trails that I can't even conceive of, and I like to ski. And here he is performing surgery. And Zach was another client of ours. He's performing surgery because of a federal injunction we won, allowing him the right to go to medical school. He's going to be a doctor in 2 years. He's deaf. He has a disability. He's extraordinary. And so, this slide please. It's interesting when I talk with families that are impacted by food allergy, a lot of times I get pushback, especially from parents saying, you know, my child doesn't have a disability. It's not like they're in a wheelchair, or it's not like they're deaf, or it's not like they're blind. And I think implicit in that statement is this idea that if you have a disability, you're somehow weak, or somehow not extraordinary in a good way, or somehow less than. And that's certainly not true for the people that I told you about, and there are countless others. And you know, you look at someone like Mason, like many of you in the room, Mason has great capacity to change the world for the better, and he's done that at the age of 11. But he has a food allergy, and he's an individual with a disability. The reason that's important is because that's how you get rights. And it's when you qualify as an individual with a disability that you're entitled to protection under federal law and sometimes under state law as well, that gives you the right to equal access and full participation and inclusion. And it says that you cannot be turned away or not allowed to participate or retaliated against because of your disability. So it does matter. And this is the cold, hard legal definition. It's only really since about 2009 that individuals with food allergies were considered to be people with disabilities. Back before then, the law was different. There were lots of people with lots of disabilities who were being turned away by the courts. But the law changed. And since that time, people with food allergies are considered individuals with disabilities if they have a substantial impairment to a major life activity. Well, I think you'd all agree that breathing is a major life activity, and eating is another major life activity. And food allergy, wow, does it impact both eating and breathing? Therefore, there's a substantial impairment of a major life activity, and guess what? You are entitled to protection of federal law and sometimes state law as well. But there wasn't a statement from the government saying that. And a lot of us really wanted to see a strong statement from the government coming out in support of people with food allergies. And what these two kids accomplished is that. This is a quote from the letter of finding that the Department of Justice issued in their case, saying a peanut allergy qualifies as a disability under the ADA if it can potentially impair a major life activity such as breathing. They're standing up, they're risking their friends, accomplish that for all of us and for all of our kids. And it's a really important precedent for all of us. Slide. So, what rights do you have? There are basically two federal laws that give you protection. There's the Americans with Disabilities Act. That provides that you cannot experience discrimination if you're a person with a disability in employment, in state and local government services, and in what's called places of public accommodation, but that's a legal term for businesses. Businesses can't discriminate against you, private business. So basically everywhere. There are very few exceptions to what areas where the ADA applies. And then there's Section 504, which a lot of you probably know from education and from 504 plans in school, but that's only a tiny little part of what 504 does. 504 has been around since 1973, and it's a federal law that says if you take federal dollars, if you take federal funding, if you take government milk, if you get to use government equipment or campsites, then you are doing so on a promise not to discriminate. You can't take federal money and also discriminate. There are a lot of places that are covered by 504 that you would never expect. Hotels very often take federal funding. Scouting organizations very often take federal benefits like milk or hot dogs or use of government facilities. In some cases, access to cast-off weapons. There's a whole variety of ways that Section 504 applies. Now, there's one area that we need to mention because it's kind of, at least for lawyers, the elephant in the room, and it's air travel. Air travel is really, really important, and it's very scary for families with food allergy for lots of reasons. And unfortunately, these laws don't apply in the air. They do not apply in air travel, and that's why we're still hearing stories. It's not just for people with food allergies, it's for anyone with a disability. That's why we're still hearing stories about people with wheelchairs who are being made to crawl on and off of planes, who aren't able to use the restrooms. It's why people with food allergies often don't get the protections and access that they need in the air. It means there are very few ways to challenge poor treatment. What does apply is something called the Air Carrier Access Act. So you do have a few rights. And one of the important things is that you are allowed to request to pre-board to wipe down your seating area. I know that there's one specific airline that some of you may have flown here on this weekend that has a written policy that says if you have a food allergy, you cannot pre-board. I would say that policy violates federal law, and if you ran into that buzzsaw, I would love to know about it because we'd really like to change that. So air travel is a little bit different. And then there's state law. Most states have some kind of discrimination law that protects you. Slide. Discrimination, you can probably kind of imagine what it is. Exclusion, being treated differently, not being allowed to participate equally. All of those things are discrimination. Slide. So why do we need disability law? This is a picture that was taken in a classroom in Western Pennsylvania. I think it was about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And if you can see, there's a little desk in the back that's separate from all the other lunch tables. And that was the desk where a little boy who was in kindergarten with food allergies was supposed to sit. The school decided that in order to keep him safe, he should not sit at the lunch table like all the other kindergartners. And instead, he was supposed to sit in that lonely desk. Well, I've had kids who've been to kindergarten. I remember when I was in kindergarten, and I think lunch was the most important part of the day. And if you're sitting in that corner by yourself, you're missing out on a really important part of your education. And you're really set up as different than everybody else in a way that you shouldn't be. Slide. So, food allergies and the courts. It's kind of a new area of law, which is pretty exciting. And there have been some cases, but I think we're going to see more. As you guys get old enough to get jobs, you have rights that protect you. And I think we're going to see more cases involving employment and what rights people with food allergies have. The boy in the center, his name is Noah Joseph. He has food allergies, and he also has diabetes and celiac. And when he was 13, instead of, playing video games like my son, Noah Joseph took on a discriminatory policy that Amtrak had of excluding kids with food allergies from traveling as unaccompanied minors. He was looking to travel to visit his grandmother. It was a 1-hour ride, and he had an older brother who was 16 or 17 who was very familiar with what to do in the event of an allergic reaction. And Amtrak's policy prevented him from traveling to visit his grandmother, so he challenged that policy. Things like this, the sign on the right, this is an actual sign that's on the Cape in Massachusetts at an ice cream store. For many of us with nut allergies or dairy allergies, obviously we don't even think about actually eating at an ice cream store, but what message does it send when you see that sign about your value and your right to live in the world? And so that's why this presentation is called The Right to Live in the World. In 1966, there was a blind lawyer who talked about the right to live in the world, and he wasn't talking about the things that people think of as important, like the safety and the physical access to a sidewalk. He was talking about the right to do fun things, the right to do the things that make us human. And I think as we see the law developing in food allergy, a lot of it is going to be around these things that are supposed to be fun. And if you can't do those, then what right do you have? What rights do you have? So I remember when my son was diagnosed that I would very much have liked him to be wrapped in bubble wrap. And I couldn't have imagined him wanting to do things like go to sleepovers. Well, I can maybe imagine him wanting to do it. I couldn't have imagined myself saying yes. Couldn't have imagined sending him to summer camp, to a lot of the things that are really what's important. And that's really the reason why we need disability law, because it's especially important for kids and teenagers with food allergies to have independence and to be safely in the world and to be included when they do it. Change the slide. Thank you. So you recognize this person, this is Mason. And he said a lot of important things. He's got a lot of wisdom, and he just comes out with these things like about the carrots, and they kind of amaze me. This is what he said: it's a really bad experience to be excluded because of my allergy, but I've also learned that it's not that there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with discriminating against me. That's incredibly profound, and it's accurate. So the longer version of what happened to Mason and Sam is that last spring, Mason wanted to join Young Shakespeare Players East. It's a program that actually has its roots here in Wisconsin, a program called Young Shakespeare Players. Anyone from this area might be familiar with it. And Young Shakespeare Players East teaches kids how to perform Shakespeare, full-length Shakespeare, which is a really great thing. And Sam was in this program and performed in, is it Macbeth? Julius Caesar? Julius Caesar. And so it was a program that was important in the community, and it was something that was really important to Sam. And Mason wanted to be a part of it because he saw how cool it was when he went and saw Sam on stage. And when he tried to register for the program, what followed was months and months and months of trying to avoid his participation altogether. So Young Shakespeare Players East is a program that is open, in theory, they say, to any child between the ages of 7 and 18. Mason was 10 at the time, and his mother was told that he couldn't register maybe next year, because apparently if you have a food allergy, you need to wait until, I don't know when, you grow out of it or something. So he initially wasn't allowed to join at all. And when Sam heard that he was excluded, she did something incredibly brave. And this is the kind of friend that I really hope my son has if he ever runs into discrimination. Sam sent an email to the program director. And in this email, she said that she thought it was wrong to exclude Mason because of his food allergy, and that she thought it was discrimination. She actually used that word. And the program unbelievably responded by saying she needed to apologize for what she did wrong, or she would be kicked out of the program. So Sam's parents thought about it, and they talked with the program director and said, this is something we think is admirable. We think this is something that was loyal and a good thing, something that should be applauded. We don't think she should be kicked out of the program for being a good friend. And the program director thought about it and dug in her heels and said she apologizes or she's kicked out. And if she apologizes, she can come back in on probation. She did not apologize. And she was kicked out. And so Mason's parents continued to try and educate the program. They were in contact with FARE, and FARE offered free training to the program to make them feel comfortable that they could handle an allergic reaction. And nothing was good enough. There was always a wall. There was always a reason Mason couldn't participate. And at one point, this is all back and forth in writing, in emails. And at one point, the director of the program went to a lawyer, a disabilities lawyer, to find out what they really had to do. And she sent an email to Mason's mom and said, all of those things that you said we had to do, I found out that we actually have to do them. So let me know if Mason still wants to sign up for the program, because I'm going to have to think about shutting the whole thing down. And so Mason and his family live in a small community, and they faced a terrible choice, really, of doing what they felt was right, standing up for Mason's rights, asking a program to follow the law and be inclusive, knowing that doing so, they risked the program shutting down, a program that was important to their friends and people they valued in their community. So choosing to file a complaint was not an easy choice, and it remains not an easy choice for them. Slide. So this was the letter of finding that was issued June 10th of 2016. The United States Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney for the state of Massachusetts found that there was discrimination by Young Shakespeare Players East against these kids, and that there was retaliation against Sam, and that the behavior of the adults of Young Shakespeare Players East was coercive and retaliatory. And that was just huge. As far as I know, this is the first letter of finding, and there aren't that many letter of findings that come out, maybe 1 or 2 a year at most. I'm not aware of any other letter of finding that involves food allergy, and I don't know of any other letter of finding that involves an ally, because disability law doesn't only protect individuals who have disabilities, it protects the people who speak up for them. So their friends, their parents, their family, those people are also protected. And this letter of finding made that clear. But here's the real story. The real story is that was a win for everybody else. Because today, Mason and Sam are still not in the program. They're still not welcome there. They're still not safe there. And this is a program that has made deliberate efforts in the community to continue to exclude and target the family, that has said things of Sam like the disrespectful or not a protected class in the newspaper in a small community. And so I really want to underscore the courage that it took for them to stand up, and the courage that it takes on an ongoing basis to continue to fight for what they believe is right. And it's not for them, it's for all of us. So, Sam probably couldn't have imagined a year or 2 ago that she would be at a food allergy conference, because she doesn't have any food allergies, and yet here she is up and down the escalators having a great time and speaking. And she continues to show just incredible guts and courage. And you could turn the slide. I'm a big Harry Potter fan, and this is one of my favorite lines from Harry Potter, and it will always make me think of Sam. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. And that's what she's done, and that's what she continues to do with a lot of style and with a lot of guts. And so if you want to come up and speak for a few minutes, I know everybody would love to hear what you have to say.
So I don't have a food allergy, and back to what Mason was saying about the carrots, I guess that kind of makes me a boring carrot. So I remember the day that I wrote the email. I definitely was not expecting something like this to happen. And when my mom first told me about it, that it was about YSP, at first I was really nervous for myself because I thought it had something to do with me not being able to go back. Then when I found out that it was actually about my friend that wasn't able to go, my perspective kind of changed on a couple things. One, that my perspective changed on YSP because this community that I'd kind of taken in as my second home wasn't letting my friend join. And another thing, it wasn't letting someone join because of something so life-threatening, something that was a big deal. After I wrote the letter and sent it, I had no regret about what happened, but also in that moment I wasn't thinking of the consequences. And after the whiplash and the consequences of my words did come back, I still didn't regret it, but it was a very big deal for me because I was losing so many people that I cared about. And one thing about losing my friends that really opened my eyes about something was that when I did share this story with them and I did tell them what happened with YSP and with the director and with Mason about everything that was happening, they acknowledged it, they understood, but then they told me they didn't really care. They told me it wasn't like, okay, let's see what we can do, but then they ended up just turning away and not doing anything about it. I definitely think standing up is a very hard thing because the things that come with it afterwards, the consequences, there are pros and cons to it, and I think the cons are way bigger, but I do think that in the end, the pros do matter because I don't regret anything, and if I would go back and do it again, I would.
So, we could change the slide. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. I think this is a really important conversation to have. So, to the parents in the room, we are new as having rights under disability law. This is a very new movement. And we all have different ways of protecting our families and different comfort levels. We have different reactions to exclusion and how you respond to that and what's the right thing to do. But there are a lot of things we have in common. I know that in the court of public opinion as food allergy parents, we can never win, right? I mean, if you ask to be included, you want the world to change for your child. And if you want safety, you're trying to wrap your child in a bubble. I mean, you really just can't win. And so my hope is that when there are people who stand up for our rights, for the rights of us as a community, that we rush to their support, because they are going to be getting 1,000 times the censure that we get when we ask for accommodation. And they are risking everything to advance the rights of our community. And they need friends in those moments when they're standing up. And to the teens in the room, I know that you have the capacity to change the world for the better, not despite your food allergies, but because of them. I hear a lot about the silver lining of having food allergies, and I know it's true. The silver lining that I see the most is that kids and teenagers and adults with food allergies, they have a great capacity for compassion because they know what it feels like to be excluded. And so I just hope for the teens in the room that you will remember that feeling of what it feels like to be excluded, and that you will act and speak always with compassion and respect for others, especially for others with disabilities, and that you will speak and act with the compassion that you have learned the hard way. And so with that, I'm going to be available to answer questions at one of the tables outside afterwards. I don't know if we have time for questions now.